In the dusty streets of South Tucson, Arizona, where old grudges simmer under the desert sun and family secrets run deeper than abandoned copper mines in the Dragoon Mountains, one man's humiliation became the catalyst for a reckoning 30 years in the making. What started as cruel laughter echoing through the Tucson Saloon on South 6th Avenue in 1990 would culminate in a courtroom revelation that would shake the foundations of one of Pima County's most prominent ranching families. This is the story of James "Jimmy" Cordova, a man who endured mockery, betrayal, and exile in the shadow of the Tucson Mountains, only to discover that sometimes justice wears the robes of a probate judge and speaks through the yellowed pages of a last will and testament. Sometimes the last laugh belongs to the one who was laughed at first. The amber glow of the Tucson Saloon cast long shadows across weathered faces as Jimmy Cordova pushed through the heavy wooden doors that October evening in 1990. At 28, Jimmy carried himself with the quiet dignity of a man who'd spent his life working the land, his calloused hands telling stories of dawn to dusk labor under the unforgiving Arizona sun. The saloon on South 6th Avenue was a time capsule of the Old West, with exposed wooden beams and faded photographs of cattle drives hanging on every wall. A jukebox in the corner played Garth Brooks' "Friends in Low Places," while the neon Budweiser sign behind the bar flickered intermittently. "Whiskey straight," Jimmy said to Miguel, the aging bartender who'd been pouring drinks at the Buckhorn since Jimmy was in high school. Jimmy had come here tonight with purpose burning in his chest, like desert fire. Word had spread through town. His estranged uncle, Don Eduardo Cordova, patriarch of the sprawling Cordova Ranch empire near Vail, was finally ready to make peace. After 15 years of bitter family feuds, Eduardo had allegedly sent word that he wanted to reconcile with his brother's son. "You hear about old Eduardo?" Tom Patterson called out from his usual corner booth. "Word is, he's finally ready to bury the hatchet with the family." Jimmy's pulse quickened. This was exactly what he'd hoped to hear. "Hell yes," chimed in Carlos Gutierrez from the bar. "My cousin Maria works up at the big house out on Old Spanish Trail. Says the old man's been asking questions about you. Real specific questions about how you've been managing your daddy's old place." For years, Jimmy had dreamed of this moment, the chance to be welcomed back into the family fold, to work alongside his uncle on the ranch that his grandfather had built from nothing in the 1920s near the Rincon Mountains. The Cordova Ranch was legendary in southern Arizona, spanning over 50,000 acres and employing dozens of local families. "I tell you what, Jimmy," Patterson said, raising his beer bottle, "when you're running cattle on Eduardo's best pasture land, don't forget us little folks." The laughter that followed was good-natured, but Jimmy detected skepticism underneath. He'd heard these men talk about Eduardo before, shrewd, calculating, and utterly ruthless in business dealings. But Jimmy wanted to believe. God, how desperately he wanted to believe that 15 years of isolation and struggle were finally coming to an end. "Here's to family," Jimmy said, and drained his whiskey in one burning gulp. Tomorrow, he would drive out to the main house. Tomorrow, he would finally reclaim his birthright. The drive to Eduardo's ranch the next morning felt like traveling through a living postcard. Jimmy's battered 1982 Ford pickup kicked up clouds of red dust as he navigated the winding dirt road off Old Spanish Trail, passing through gates bearing the distinctive C brand that had marked Cordova cattle for 3 generations. Jimmy had dressed in his best clothes, a crisp white shirt, dark Wrangler jeans, and Tony Lama boots polished until they gleamed. His hair was freshly cut at Barrio Barber Shop on South 4th Avenue, his face clean-shaven, wanting to make the right impression. The main house materialized like something from a Western movie, a sprawling adobe structure with red tile roofs and wraparound porches. Maria Gutierrez answered the door, her familiar face brightening when she saw him. "Jimmy, mijo, you look so handsome," she said, embracing him warmly. "Don Eduardo is expecting you. He's in the study with some business associates from downtown." As Maria led him through the house, Jimmy marveled at the opulence. hand-carved furniture, oil paintings of prize bulls, Persian rugs covering polished hardwood floors. This was the world his father had been exiled from. "Don Eduardo? Jimmy is here." "Send him in, Maria. Gentlemen, you're about to meet the young man I've been telling you about." Eduardo Cordova sat behind his massive oak desk like a king holding court. At 63, he still cut an imposing figure, silver hair perfectly groomed, weathered face lined from decades under the Arizona sun. Two men in expensive suits occupied chairs facing the desk. "Jimmy, my boy!" Eduardo rose, arms spread wide. "Look at you! The spitting image of your father. These are my attorneys, Mr. Harrison and Mr. Wells from Lewis and Roca downtown. We were discussing family business that concerns you directly." Something about their presence made Jimmy uneasy, but he pushed the feeling aside. "Jimmy, I want you to know I've been watching you these past few years," Eduardo began, his tone formal. "I've had reports about your work ethic, your character. I've been very thorough in my research. I've worked hard to honor Papa's memory and prove myself worthy of the Cordova name." Eduardo's smile was thin and didn't reach his eyes. "Worthy? What exactly do you think you're worthy of?" Jimmy felt heat rising in his cheeks. "I hope to be worthy of your trust, of the chance to work alongside you. Mr. Harrison, please read the relevant section from our investigation." The attorney opened a manila folder. "According to birth records from Tucson Medical Center, cross-referenced with medical records and witness statements from 1962, Jimmy's mouth went dry. Eduardo's eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction. "You see, Jimmy, there's something about bloodlines you don't understand. Something your father never told you." The walls seemed to close in as Eduardo's words took on a razor-sharp edge. "Roberto wasn't your biological father, boy. You were never a Cordova at all." The words hit Jimmy like a physical blow, stealing his breath and leaving him gripping the chair arms as the world tilted. Eduardo's revelation echoed in his mind like a death knell for everything he'd believed about himself. "That's impossible," Jimmy whispered. "My mother would have told me. Roberto raised me as his son." "His pity," Eduardo finished coldly, withdrawing a manila envelope thick with documents. "Mr. Wells, please share what our investigator discovered about his mother's activities in 1961. The attorney pulled out surveillance photos, grainy black and white images of Jimmy's young mother with various seasonal workers who'd passed through Tucson. Each photograph was dated and annotated, documenting her associations during the time frame when Jimmy would have been conceived. "Roberto knew, of course," Eduardo continued with satisfaction. "He was so besotted with your mother that he agreed to marry her anyway, to give her bastard child his name. My sainted brother, always the fool when it came to matters of the heart." "Why?" Jimmy croaked out. "Why tell me this now?" "Because you've been walking around thinking you had some claim to the Cordova legacy. I decided it was time you learned your place in this world." Jimmy struggled to his feet, legs unsteady. Everything he'd believed about his identity was crumbling. "Get out!" Eduardo snapped. "Get out of my house and don't ever come back. You're not family, you never were family, and you never will be family." Jimmy stumbled to his truck, driving back down Old Spanish Trail in a haze of shock. Without conscious thought, he found himself at the Tucson Saloon, desperate for alcohol to numb the pain. "Jimmy, how'd the family reunion go?" Tom Patterson called out as Jimmy slumped onto a bar stool. "Double," Jimmy said hoarsely to Miguel. "Make it a triple." "That good, huh?" Carlos Gutierrez laughed cruelly. "What's the matter, boy? The old man not ready to hand over the kingdom?" And then, because the whiskey loosened his tongue and the pain was unbearable, Jimmy told them everything. Eduardo's revelation, the photographs, the brutal dismissal. The laughter started slowly with Gutierrez, then Patterson joined in. Within minutes, the entire saloon erupted with cruel, mocking laughter that echoed off the walls and pierced Jimmy's soul. "A bastard!" Patterson gasped. "All these years we've been calling you Cordova, and you're nothing but some migrant worker's bastard." "No wonder Eduardo never wanted anything to do with your family," someone else chimed in. The laughter grew vicious, feeding on itself. Someone started chanting, "Bastard Jimmy!" and the nickname spread through the room. Jimmy sat paralyzed by complete humiliation as the laughter washed over him in waves. He threw money on the bar and stumbled toward the door as the cruel sounds followed him. This was how his story would be told, not as a hard-working man denied his birthright, but as the comedy of a bastard who thought he was somebody he wasn't. 33 years later, the mahogany-paneled courtroom of the Pima County Superior Court felt like a world away from the Tucson Saloon. Yet Jimmy Cordova, now 61 and weathered by decades of quiet determination, could still hear echoes of that cruel laughter. The October morning sun streamed through tall windows as the future of the Cordova Ranch empire would be decided. Jimmy sat behind his attorney, David Chen, a sharp young lawyer from Phoenix who specialized in inheritance disputes. Across the aisle, Eduardo's representatives filled 3 rows: corporate attorneys, ranch managers, and accountants who'd spent 2 years since Eduardo's death trying to locate heirs to contest the will. Eduardo had died at 86 in 2023, alone and bitter, leaving behind a $40 million fortune and a will that shocked everyone. "All rise for Judge Patricia Lawson," the bailiff announced. Judge Lawson, a woman in her late 50s with intelligent eyes, had seen countless family disputes. Inheritance cases fascinated her, how death revealed family secrets when millions were at stake. "We're here for the final reading of Eduardo Miguel Cordova's will. Mr. Harrison, proceed." The same attorney who'd humiliated Jimmy decades earlier rose, now gray-haired and moving carefully. He'd been Eduardo's lawyer for 40 years. "The will contains unusual provisions," Harrison began, adjusting his glasses. "From Section 3, having lived knowing the truth about my nephew James Cordova, that he was not Roberto's biological son but an illegitimate child, I spent decades ensuring he'd receive nothing. However, in my final years, I understand that James proved himself more of a true Cordova than Roberto ever was." Jimmy's heart stopped, then resumed at double speed. Harrison continued. "Through investigators, I monitored James's life after 1990. I watched him build a successful business through honest work. I observed him maintain dignity despite public humiliation. He never attempted to profit from the Cordova name. While blood determines biology, character determines worth." The courtroom fell silent. "Therefore, I bequeath to James Cordova the entirety of my estate, the ranch, all properties, livestock, equipment, and financial assets he earned through 33 years of honest living what I spent my life denying him, the right to carry forward the Cordova legacy." Chaos erupted as Harrison shouted over the noise, "To those who laughed at James Cordova in the Tucson Saloon on October 23, 1990, know that your mockery only forged him into the man worthy of this inheritance. The last laugh belongs to him." Jimmy sat stunned as corporate lawyers whispered frantically, and his attorney gripped his arm with excitement. "Are there challenges to this will?" Judge Lawson asked. "None, Your Honor. Mr. Cordova's mental faculties were examined by 3 physicians. The will is ironclad. By the power vested in me, I declare Eduardo Cordova's will valid. The estate is awarded to James Cordova. Court adjourned." As the gavel fell, Jimmy was surrounded by reporters and lawyers. But his mind drifted to that October evening in 1990, to the cruel laughter that had changed everything. Eduardo had been right. The last laugh belonged to him. Not bitter revenge, but the quiet satisfaction of a man who'd discovered that justice sometimes takes 33 years to arrive. Outside, Jimmy looked at the desert landscape stretching toward the Rincon Mountains that was now his domain. He'd finally understood Eduardo's gift, not just the inheritance, but knowing he'd earned it through character, not blood. For the first time in 33 years, James Cordova smiled without reservation.